There is a moment, rare, fragile, and almost sacred, where someone who has spent their entire life hiding behind emotional distance suddenly softens in your presence. It doesn't happen often, it doesn't happen easily, and it certainly doesn't happen with everyone. But the moment your arms wrapped around them, something inside them shifted, something they've never been able to explain, something they themselves don't fully understand. It wasn't the hug alone, it was the feeling within the hug, the way your warmth wrapped around their walls, the way your breath steadied theirs, the way you held them without rushing, without pushing, without demanding. For the first time in a very long time, their nervous system didn't feel threatened, their heartbeat didn't spike out of fear, their mind didn't start racing to find an exit. Instead, there was a strange, surprising, almost overwhelming sense of safety. And that's the part they will never admit out loud. Because they don't want anyone to know that they can feel this deeply, that they can melt this completely. But they did. They melted, right there in your arms, and they've been trying to make sense of it ever since. They aren't the kind of person who lets emotions in easily. They've been conditioned through life, through pain, through years of feeling misunderstood, to protect themselves at all costs. They taught themselves to hide, to detach, to stay strong by staying distant. And yet the moment you held them, something inside them cracked open. Not in a dramatic way, not in a cinematic way, but in a very human, very vulnerable, very unexpected way. The truth is, they crave what you gave them far more than they allow themselves to acknowledge, not because they're weak, not because they're needy, but because deep inside that calm, distant, seemingly unaffected exterior lives a heart that has never truly felt safe with anyone. Until that moment, until you. They have spent their entire life avoiding closeness, not because they don't want it, but because closeness never felt safe, because the people who were supposed to make them feel held often made them feel small, because the moments that should have felt comforting often felt overwhelming, because vulnerability for them was never met with gentleness, it was met with confusion, rejection, or pressure. So they taught themselves to exist behind an invisible wall, not a wall against others, but a wall for self-protection. A wall they built one brick at a time, each brick shaped by disappointment, broken trust, and the fear of being hurt again. And they wore it proudly, like armor. But the human heart, even one that hides well, has needs it can't erase. It has longings it can't suppress. Every distant person is still a person, every avoidant still feels, and every avoidant still craves connection. They just don't know how to hold on to it without feeling like they're losing themselves. Your hug wasn't just a hug, it was a shock to their system, a softness they never saw coming, a moment they didn't know they needed, a moment they didn't even realize they missed until it happened. And for the first time in a long time, their mind didn't tell them to run, their body didn't tense up, their emotions didn't shut down. For once the wall stepped aside, not because they wanted it to, but because your energy made it feel safe enough to. That's the thing about them. They don't soften for words, they soften for energy, they soften for presence, they soften for people who feel safe without trying to prove that they are. And whether you realize it or not, you have something they rarely encounter in their world, a calming presence that doesn't suffocate, a steady warmth that doesn't demand, and a genuine heart that doesn't threaten their freedom. They didn't melt because they wanted to. They melted because they couldn't help it. Something deep inside them recognized something deep inside you. And that recognition felt like home. It's ironic, they push away closeness, yet they crave the kind of closeness that feels gentle and grounding. They run from intimacy, yet they long for someone who won't run from them. They avoid their emotions, yet they want someone who can handle the emotional parts of them they don't know how to express. Your hug was the doorway to that truth. Their mind might deny it, their behavior might hide it, their silence might cover it, but their body, their heartbeat, their stillness in that moment, all of it told the truth. They wanted that hug more than they will ever say, and they felt that hug more deeply than you will ever know. The moment your arms wrapped around them, their fear and longing collided. For a second, they weren't the strong, independent, distant self they show to the world. They were human again, soft, real, exposed, and surprisingly, relieved. If you pay attention to them closely, you'll notice something subtle. They want affection, but only from someone who feels safe. They want touch, but only from someone who doesn't overwhelm them. They want connection, but only from someone who won't demand more than they can give in the moment. Your hug was the kind of affection they secretly wish they could experience without fear. It spoke the language they understand but don't know how to express. It reached a part of them they usually keep buried. It gave them a taste of what true safety feels like, and that's why they melted. They've been starved for that feeling, starved for connection that doesn't hurt, starved for presence that doesn't pressure, starved for emotions that don't explode or demand or overwhelm. Your hug was the moment their emotional hunger met emotional nourishment, and their body surrendered to it. This is why they haven't stopped replaying it. This is why they haven't forgotten it. This is why, despite their distance, something inside them keeps pulling back toward you. Because that moment wasn't just about physical touch, it was about emotional safety. It was about internal calm. It was about the rare experience of being held without expectation. And for someone who has lived their entire life feeling too much or not enough, that moment was priceless. See, they don't melt often. They don't soften easily. They don't let people in unless something inside them feels a level of safety they can't logically explain. And your hug created that safety. It didn't ask them to change. It didn't push them to open up. It didn't demand words they didn't have. It simply held them and allowed them to be exactly who they were. And that is what they've always craved. Not passion that burns too quickly, not intensity that overwhelms, not affection that suffocates, but gentleness, warmth, stillness, presence, a kind of closeness that doesn't take away their sense of self, but gives them space to breathe, to exist, and to feel without fear. When you hugged them, their nervous system finally exhaled, their emotional guard finally loosened, their heart finally felt unthreatened. It was the kind of moment that doesn't look dramatic on the outside, yet changes everything on the inside. And though they may try to act unchanged, though they may pull away again, though they may pretend your hug meant nothing, it did. It meant everything. It reached places inside them they never let anyone reach. Because deep down, beneath the armor, beneath the emotional walls, beneath the instinct to run, they want to be held, they want to be understood, they want to feel safe, they want to melt into someone who won't use their vulnerability against them. Your hug showed them that this is possible. And that single moment, quiet, gentle, unexpected, became a moment their heart won't forget. A moment that left an imprint no distance can erase. A moment that reminded them of what they truly crave, but rarely allow themselves to experience. They melted because, for the first time in a long time, they felt held, they felt accepted, they felt safe, they felt seen, and that is the one thing they've been longing for all along. They felt seen in a way they weren't prepared for, and it was almost unsettling, because being seen is both what they crave and what they fear the most. The moment your arms wrapped around them, they weren't just held physically, they were held emotionally, energetically, spiritually. That kind of closeness exposes truths they have spent years avoiding. The days after that moment felt different for them. Something inside kept replaying how calm they felt, how still their mind became, how strangely comforting it was to let themselves rest against you. They don't rest with people. They don't relax around others easily. Their guard is always up, not because they don't trust, but because life taught them that letting their guard down often leads to hurt. Yet with you, everything in them softened without warning. They didn't plan it. They didn't choose it. Their body chose for them. And that's what scares them the most, how natural it felt. They're not used to their defenses failing. They're not used to being unable to fight the warmth rising in their chest. They're not used to feeling safe enough to lean in. But in that moment, leaning into you didn't feel like weakness. It felt like relief, like their soul finally unclenched. But relief is dangerous to someone who has survived by staying closed. When something feels good, they immediately fear how easily it could be taken away. They've experienced too many moments where closeness turned into loss, trust turned into disappointment, and vulnerability turned into regret. So even though your hug awakened something beautiful, it also awakened fear, the fear of wanting more. That's the contradiction inside them. They crave the very thing they push away. They long for a kind of love that doesn't demand anything, yet they're terrified of losing themselves in that love. Your hug cracked open a part of them they've kept locked for years, and now they're struggling to understand what it means. They didn't expect it to feel so good. They didn't expect it to feel so safe. They didn't expect it to feel like something they could get used to. And that's what terrifies them, how easy it would be to fall into that softness again. They pretend nothing happened. They act like it didn't affect them. They go back to being cool, calm, distant, collected. But inside, they know something shifted. They know something opened. They know you reached a place inside them no one else has reached. There's a moment, silent, invisible but real, where they let their mind wander back to how good it felt. The warmth, the quiet, the stillness, the absence of fear, the sense that for once they didn't have to fight their instincts. They didn't have to be tough. They didn't have to be independent. They didn't have to be on guard. They could just be. And that kind of peace is addictive to someone who rarely experiences it. What they felt in your arms wasn't intensity, it was softness, and softness is something they've been deprived of for most of their life. Not because they didn't want it, but because they never found it in a form that didn't overwhelm them. Your presence didn't demand, it invited. Your touch didn't pressure, it comforted. Your energy didn't take, it offered. And that subtle difference is what made them melt. They've been around people who pushed too hard, loved too loudly, wanted too much. People who mistook closeness for ownership. People who thought connection had to be intense to be real. But intensity scares them. Pressure suffocates them. Expectations make them retreat. Your hug did the opposite. It felt like an exhale they didn't know they were holding in. It felt like being allowed, not obligated. It felt like being met gently instead of pulled forcefully. It felt like the kind of closeness they could trust. Deep down, they've always longed for a place where they could feel calm and connected without feeling trapped. For a person who understands that their distance is not a rejection, it's a shield. For someone who knows that behind their quiet, behind their discomfort, behind their walls, there is a heart that wants to be reached with patience, not pressure. You reached it, not by force, not by trying to fix them, not by demanding vulnerability, but by showing them that they could be held without losing themselves. That's the part that stays with them. That's the part that scares them. That's the part they crave again. They felt themselves melting into a version of themselves they rarely show. A softer, gentler, almost childlike self. A self that remembers what it felt like to be held without conditions. A self that doesn't have to be strong all the time. A self that doesn't have to pretend they don't need anyone. They don't let that self come out often. It's too vulnerable, too easily hurt, too easily misunderstood. So they protect it with distance, sarcasm, emotional detachment. But your hug bypassed all of that. It went straight to the part of them that just wants to be loved quietly. And that touches them more deeply than you will ever know. Because they've spent their life believing they were too much when they opened up and not enough when they didn't. They've been criticized for being distant, misunderstood for being closed off, pressured to be more expressive, more available, more emotional. So they learned to hide. They learned to silence their needs. They learned to depend only on themselves. But in your arms, something inside them whispered, "You're safe here. You don't have to hide." And that whisper was dangerous because it felt so true. They haven't felt that kind of safety in years, maybe ever. That hug brought up memories, not specific ones, but emotional ones. The longing they buried, the connection they stopped believing existed, the gentleness they thought they would never feel again. Your presence awakened feelings they forgot how to feel, or feelings they never learned to feel properly. And that's why they froze for a moment. Not out of fear, but out of recognition. Their soul recognized you before their mind did. That recognition triggered something powerful, a release. You may not have seen it, but their body softened. Their shoulders dropped. Their breath slowed. Their heartbeat steadied. Their mind, usually full of escape routes and overthinking, went quiet. For a moment, they weren't analyzing, they weren't defending, they weren't withdrawing, they weren't pretending. They were just there, fully, deeply, vulnerably present. And that presence melted them. It wasn't the physical closeness alone, it was the emotional safety that wrapped around them like a blanket. For someone who lives with emotional armor, that kind of safety feels like a miracle. But miracles make them nervous. Miracles make them suspicious. Miracles feel too good to trust. So after that moment, their mind began to pull back, not because they didn't feel something, they felt too much, and feeling too much is exactly what frightens them. They may act as though they've forgotten the moment, they may distance themselves, they may become quiet, cold, or neutral again, but that's just how they cope with vulnerability. They retreat not because your closeness was wrong, but because it was right. They know what happens when they care. They know what happens when they let someone in. They know what happens when they allow themselves to need someone. They get scared of losing it. They get scared of messing it up. They get scared of wanting more. So instead of leaning in, they retreat. But here's the truth they won't say. That hug is still lingering in their memory. They can still feel the warmth. They can still recall the calm. They still think about how good it felt to not fight themselves for once. They still wonder what it would feel like to be held by you again. They crave it, the gentleness, the presence, the sense of being cared for without pressure. They crave the softness they felt in that moment because softness for them is rare. They crave the feeling of being valued without being overwhelmed. They crave the emotional warmth you offered without making them feel obligated to offer anything back immediately. That's what they truly long for, connection without pressure. Closeness without suffocation, love without losing themselves, and in your arms they felt a version of that, a taste of something they never believed they could have safely. The truth is, they didn't melt because of the hug itself. They melted because of who was hugging them, because of the energy you brought, because of the calm you radiated, because of the emotional safety you provided. You didn't just hug them, you reached them. And now a part of them is trying to figure out how to handle a feeling they've avoided for most of their life, the feeling of wanting to be close to someone, the feeling of wanting to trust someone, the feeling of wanting to surrender their guard just a little more. They may not say it, they may hide it, they may act unaffected, but something inside them hasn't been the same since. The walls they built so carefully aren't as solid as they used to be. The emotional distance they cling to doesn't feel as necessary. The certainty they had about not letting people in doesn't feel as absolute. They're starting to realize something they never expected, that maybe, just maybe, closeness doesn't have to be dangerous. Maybe vulnerability doesn't have to hurt. Maybe affection doesn't have to suffocate. Maybe they don't have to run the moment they feel something real. Your hug opened that possibility. Your presence awakened that hope. Your energy reminded them of something they forgot, that their heart, no matter how guarded, still wants to be held. And that desire, no matter how much they try to bury it, is beginning to rise again, one quiet, trembling, beautiful moment at a time. They don't know how to handle this new desire rising inside them. It scares them more than they'll ever admit. Wanting something means risking something, and they've spent most of their life avoiding both. So when they catch themselves replaying the moment you hugged them, they quickly look away, distract themselves, or bury the memory under silence. But their body remembers, their heart remembers, their heart remembers, their soul remembers. They remember the way they unconsciously leaned in, even if it was just for a second. They remember how their chest loosened in a way it hasn't in years. They remember how your presence didn't overwhelm them, it grounded them. They remember the strange sense of comfort they felt, a comfort so unfamiliar it almost frightened them. And now they can't help but wonder what it all means. Why did it feel so different? Why did they melt so easily? Why does the memory feel like softness threading through their chest even now? But these questions aren't ones they can speak out loud, because speaking them makes them real. And the last thing they want is for anyone, even you, to know that they felt something so deeply. So instead they stay quiet, they act normal, they revert to their familiar patterns of distance, emotional reserve, composure. But underneath that mask, their thoughts are louder than ever. Because when you hugged them, something inside them settled, something whispered, "This is what it feels like to be safe." And that whisper has been echoing ever since. They think about what went through their mind in that moment, how they weren't thinking in words but in sensations, your warmth, your stillness, the way your breath flowed in a rhythm that calmed theirs, the feeling of being held without being controlled, the feeling of being valued without being controlled, the feeling of being valued without being smothered. For a few seconds, they weren't afraid. For a few seconds, they weren't defensive. For a few seconds, they let themselves exist in vulnerability without trying to escape it. And that terrifies them, because vulnerability isn't just emotional exposure to them. Vulnerability is danger. It means the possibility of being hurt, abandoned, misunderstood. It means letting someone see the parts of them they've kept hidden for years. It means risking rejection. But what they felt in your hug didn't feel like a risk. It felt like release. They're not sure how to process that. They're not sure how to accept that maybe closeness doesn't have to come with fear, that affection doesn't have to come with pressure, that connection doesn't have to come with loss. Your hug gave them a momentary glimpse of a world they've never allowed themselves to believe in, a world where love is quiet, gentle, patient, safe, a world where someone can hold them without taking anything from them, a world where they can be close to someone without losing who they are. And now that this door has been cracked open, they can't unsee what they saw. They can't unfeel what they felt. They can't go back to pretending that they don't want closeness, not when they've experienced it in a form that didn't hurt. Deep down, beneath the fear and the confusion, something else has awakened inside them. Trust, not full trust, not fully formed, but the beginning of trust, the kind that grows quietly, slowly, invisibly, the kind that forms not through words or promises, but through safety. They trust your presence, they trust your energy, they trust the way your closeness didn't threaten their freedom. They trust that you didn't ask for more than they could give. They trust that you didn't rush them. They trust the softness you held them with. They trust in a way they don't trust many people, that you see them without judging them, and that trust is changing them in ways they haven't fully realized. Because when someone who has lived behind walls begins to trust, even just a little, those walls begin to shift. It isn't dramatic. It isn't obvious. It's subtle, quiet, slow, but it's happening, even if they fight it, even if they deny it, even if they pretend it doesn't matter. The truth is, they haven't been the same since. They notice themselves thinking about what it would feel like to be that close again. They wonder how your arms would feel around them on a bad day. They wonder if resting their head against you would bring them the same overwhelming peace. They wonder if the calm they felt was real or just an emotional accident. And they wonder why they felt so deeply at home in that brief moment of closeness. Part of them wants to run. Part of them wants to forget. Part of them wants to bury the feeling before it grows. But another part, the part buried beneath all their fear, wants more. And that's the part they're trying to silence. Not because it's wrong, but because it's too raw, too intimate, too unfamiliar. Wanting more means needing something, and needing something makes them feel exposed. They've survived by not needing. They've survived by staying self-contained, self-protected, self-reliant. But your hug cracked open the truth they've been avoiding their whole life. They do need connection. They do want closeness. They do crave softness. They do long to be loved gently. This truth is uncomfortable for them, almost unbearable, because it contradicts the identity they've built. They've always been the strong one, the distant one, the independent one, the one no one can hurt because no one ever gets close enough. But you got close. You got close without trying. You got close without forcing. You got close because something in you speaks in a language their heart understands but rarely hears, a language of calmness, patience, and safety. They think about how it felt, not just physically but emotionally. They think about how your presence made their guard lower without effort. They think about how your embrace didn't feel like a trap, it felt like a sanctuary. For once they weren't preparing for disappointment. They weren't preparing for abandonment. They weren't preparing for judgment. They weren't preparing to be misunderstood. Your arms didn't feel like something they needed to escape. They felt like something they could rest in. And rest is something their soul has been longing for silently, desperately, quietly. A rest from overthinking, from self-protection, from emotional vigilance. They haven't said a word about any of this. They won't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But inside them, the truth is unfolding slowly. They felt safe with you, safer than they've felt in a very long time, maybe ever. And safety for someone like them is the most intimate experience of all. It's why the memory lingers. It's why they can't shake the feeling. It's why they act distant now, not because they didn't feel something, but because they did. This moment awakened something else inside them too, longing, not just for you, but for what you made them feel. A longing for emotional peace, for connection that doesn't come with chaos, for affection that doesn't feel like pressure, for closeness that doesn't hurt. They've been carrying a deep emotional hunger without realizing it, a hunger that has gone unmet because they never believed it could be fulfilled safely, a hunger that they've convinced themselves they don't have. But your hug fed that hunger, even if only for a moment. It reminded them what it feels like to be human, to be soft, to be open, to be held, to be cared for, to be wanted, to be safe. And now the question lingers in their heart. What would it be like to feel that way again? The answer scares them. The desire scares them. The vulnerability scares them. But the memory keeps calling them back. Because no matter how far they pull away, no matter how much they pretend nothing happened, no matter how quiet they become, their heart has already accepted the truth their mind is still running from. They want, more than they've ever admitted, to be held, to be safe, to be close, and to be loved gently, just as they are. Being hugged by you awakened a part of them they can no longer pretend doesn't exist. And that part, fragile, tender, longing, is slowly, quietly, beautifully coming back to life. They begin to notice themselves paying attention to things they used to ignore. The way your hands move, the subtle tone in your voice, the way your presence fills a space without demanding it. These small, seemingly insignificant details imprint on them more than they expect. Every interaction becomes a quiet reminder of what it feels like to be safe with someone, to feel warmth without pressure, closeness without obligation, affection without strings. It's strange to them. It shouldn't feel this way. They've been conditioned to resist closeness, to pull away when feelings grow, to protect themselves at all costs. And yet, despite all of that, they find themselves thinking about you more than they intended. They find themselves craving the calm energy you bring. They find themselves replaying the hug in their mind, tracing the way your arms felt around them, imagining the peace that settled over them, and secretly wishing it could happen again. But along with that longing comes fear. The fear of wanting too much. The fear of feeling too deeply. The fear that if they let themselves desire this closeness again, it might vanish, leaving them exposed and empty. This fear is their constant companion, whispering doubts into every tender thought, reminding them that opening their heart is dangerous. And yet, despite the fear, something inside them rebels, quietly, insistently, painfully. Because when someone finally feels seen, truly seen, after years of avoidance, the heart refuses to go back into hiding completely. It refuses to forget that it is capable of softness, capable of trust, capable of being held without fear. That tiny spark, once ignited, doesn't fade easily. It lingers, glowing softly even in the dark, guiding them toward a truth they've long denied. They do crave connection, they do crave love, they do crave warmth. And that craving begins to reshape them in subtle ways. They start noticing their reactions to people differently. They become aware of how defensive they used to be, how quick to withdraw, how prone to shutting down. But now the memory of being held by you reminds them that vulnerability can exist without danger. That being close doesn't have to mean losing themselves. That affection can feel gentle, nourishing, and safe. Slowly, imperceptibly, these realizations carve new pathways in their mind and heart. They start to test it in small, almost imperceptible ways. A soft glance that lingers too long, a hesitant smile that feels like a bridge, a brief touch that hovers near, daring to be more than mere distance. And even when they retreat immediately afterward, unsure of how to handle the intensity of their feelings, the moments speak volumes. They reveal that your presence matters, that your energy is irreplaceable, that the memory of your embrace has left a permanent mark on their heart. Even when they try to act indifferent, even when they push away, even when they bury their longing beneath humor, sarcasm, or silence, the truth persists. You have touched a place inside them that very few ever reach. You have awakened something that refuses to go back into hiding. And though they may wrestle with their fear, their heart quietly acknowledges a longing it can no longer deny. And then comes the realization, quiet, almost imperceptible, but profoundly powerful. They begin to understand, in the deepest parts of themselves, that what they felt in your arms is not fleeting, that it is not an accident, that it is not merely physical closeness. It is the awakening of trust, the awakening of hope, the awakening of a longing that has been dormant for far too long. It is the acknowledgement that they want and deserve love that is patient, safe, and unwavering. And that acknowledgement terrifies them because it comes with the possibility of hope, desire, and longing, all things they have kept tightly controlled for so long. They realize that closeness doesn't have to be overwhelming, that touch doesn't have to suffocate, that being held doesn't mean losing themselves. These revelations are revolutionary for someone who has spent a lifetime guarding their emotions, pushing people away, and believing that independence is the only form of safety. Your hug, seemingly simple, has rewritten their understanding of connection and intimacy. It has revealed to them a world they never allowed themselves to imagine, a world where affection and trust coexist without fear. And in that realization, a profound gratitude emerges, quiet, deep, unspoken yet palpable. They are grateful for the calm you bring, the presence you offer, the patience you exhibit, the understanding you extend. They are grateful that someone has seen them in their entirety, without judgment, without expectation, without pressure. They are grateful for the rare, exquisite moment when they could simply be soft, vulnerable, human, and not feel the need to protect themselves. This gratitude is an unspoken acknowledgement that you have given them something they have been longing for their entire life, the courage to trust, to feel, and to exist fully in the warmth of connection. With time, they begin to notice the subtle ways this moment continues to influence them. They become more aware of their own emotional patterns, their walls, their instinct to retreat. They notice their heart opening slowly, cautiously, to the possibility of love that is safe, gentle, and enduring. They notice themselves lingering a little longer in your presence, savoring the calm energy that surrounds you. They notice a new sense of hope, fragile, delicate, but undeniably present, growing quietly in the depths of their heart. And then comes the ultimate understanding, profound and humbling. They recognize that what they truly crave is not just the hug itself, but the essence of what the hug represents: unconditional acceptance, unwavering patience, emotional safety, and a presence that honors who they are without demanding change. They realize that their walls were never meant to keep people out, they were meant to keep them safe, and yet in your arms they discover that safety does not require isolation, closeness does not demand surrender, love does not necessitate fear, and in this revelation, their heart finds freedom. They begin to understand that what they felt in your embrace is a glimpse of the love they have always sought, a love that accepts them in their entirety, that celebrates their strength and their vulnerability, that honors their independence while inviting closeness, that offers warmth without smothering, that provides comfort without creating obligation. This understanding is transformative, seismic, and life-altering because it shifts the very foundation of how they relate to intimacy, trust, and connection. It teaches them that love can be gentle, safe, and profoundly healing, something they never dared to believe possible. And finally, the ultimate truth settles within them. Quiet yet undeniable, they don't want to hide anymore. They don't want to retreat. They don't want to protect themselves from feeling. They want to allow themselves to be seen, to be held, to be loved, carefully, patiently, safely, just as they are. Your hug has awakened something they didn't know could exist within them: the capacity to surrender to love without fear, the courage to trust without walls, the willingness to embrace vulnerability without resistance. It has reminded them that closeness, when met with presence and patience, can be a sanctuary rather than a threat. And so they carry this awareness forward, quietly, secretly, yet powerfully. They carry the memory of your embrace like a talisman, a reminder of what it feels like to be held, safe, understood, and deeply valued. They carry the knowledge that love can exist without overwhelm, that trust can grow without pressure, that connection can be both freeing and grounding. And most importantly, they carry the awakening of their own heart, tender, soft, receptive, and yearning for more of what they have tasted in your presence. This is the profound transformation that occurs when someone who has spent a lifetime avoiding closeness finally experiences it in a way that feels safe and gentle. They melt because they trust, because they feel, because they are finally allowed to exist fully without walls. They crave it because it fills a void they have long denied. They remember it because it reveals a truth they never thought they could believe: that love, real love, can be tender, patient, and profoundly healing. And in this realization, they discover what they have always truly desired: connection that honors the heart, the soul, and the very essence of who they are. And in the quiet aftermath of your hug, as they step back into the world that once felt so cold and distant, something fundamental has changed. They are softer, they are more aware, they are more open. And even if they don't speak the words, even if they hide their longing beneath a mask of composure, even if they retreat to protect themselves from fear, inside, they carry a seed of hope, trust, and longing that will continue to grow, nurtured by the memory of your presence and the extraordinary warmth of your embrace. Because that hug was more than a gesture. It was a gift. It was a revelation. It was the awakening of a heart that has spent too long in shadows. It was a reminder that connection can be safe, that love can be gentle, that closeness can heal. And in that moment, they discovered the truth they have been searching for all along: that someone, somewhere, can see them, hold them, and love them exactly as they are. And that is the thing they have always truly craved.